The morning briefing in the pristine glass tower was routinely dull until Juliana, draped in tailored Italian silk, decided to turn her venomous wit toward the quietest person in the room. She fixated on the weathered silver band resting on Elena's right hand, letting out a sharp, practiced laugh that echoed off the mahogany walls as she belittled the piece as a cheap trinket from a forgotten roadside market. Unmoved by the public humiliation that sent awkward giggles through the 14 executives present, Elena merely rotated the antique band with her thumb, remaining as stone-faced and serene as a calm ocean before a devastating storm. While Juliana leaned back in her chair to bask in her cheap victory, Elena kept her focus fixed on the quarterly projections, without uttering a single defensive word. Her silence was not a sign of weakness, but rather a cold, calculated patience cultivated over 8 years of working in the shadow of corporate giants. To the rest of the board, Elena was simply an unpretentious asset manager who arrived early and vanished promptly at dusk. But beneath her modest exterior lay a meticulous strategist who noted every corporate flaw and recorded every hidden transgression. The gold-trimmed ring was far from a piece of cheap costume jewelry. It was an irreplaceable relic given to her by her late father during his final days in a quiet countryside hospice. Before he passed, the legendary investor had instructed her to remain completely invisible until the exact moment the company's corrupt leadership exposed their own vulnerability to the world. Elena carried that promise in every silent meeting, waiting for the day when the firm's arrogance would force them to confront the formidable legacy her family had secretly built. Unlike the self-absorbed Juliana, who had been handed a corner office solely because her uncle sat at the head of the executive board, Elena had earned her position through absolute competence and flawless discretion. She had quietly observed Juliana mistake basic market variables, mismanage millions in offshore funds, and casually shift the blame onto low-level analysts who were too terrified to speak up. Yet Elena held her tongue, knowing that an unearned title eventually becomes a trap for anyone foolish enough to mistake power for actual capability. As the morning meeting finally dragged to a close, the heavy double doors opened to admit Arthur Vance, the private equity titan whose colossal empire essentially underwrote the entire financial district. The air in the room instantly grew heavy with anticipation as the firm's top executives stood up in unison, eager to bow before the man who held their entire company's future in his hands. Arthur paid no mind to their groveling displays, stepping forward with an authoritative presence that made even the air-conditioned room feel suddenly suffocating. Midway across the polished floor, Arthur's sharp eyes caught a glint of worn silver resting on Elena's folded hands, and he halted dead in his tracks as if struck by a ghost. His usual stoic expression dissolved into pure disbelief. His gaze locked onto the unique geometric seal carved deeply into the silver band. In an instant, the grand boardroom dissolved into absolute silence, every eye darting nervously between the imposing billionaire and the quiet woman sitting peacefully at the edge of the table. Stepping past the frantic firm director who was trying to start a prepared sales pitch, Arthur walked straight toward Elena and stared down at her with a mix of awe and profound respect. He asked in a voice that trembled slightly, where she had acquired the ring, entirely ignoring the flustered corporate officers crowding around them. Elena looked up with complete composure and stated plainly that it had belonged to her father, Marcus Vance's former co-founder, who had vanished decades ago after secretly rescuing the global market from absolute collapse. The declaration hit the room like a physical blow, causing the firm's corrupt director to turn pale as his polished confidence shattered into utter panic. Arthur took a slow breath, realizing that the brilliant mastermind who had secretly financed his first multi-billion-dollar enterprise had left behind an heir who now sat right before him in a low-level cubicle. Without a second thought, the billionaire declared the pending merger deal officially dead, refusing to do business with a firm that forced true royalty to sit in the shadows of arrogant amateurs. Panic instantly erupted across the executive floor as board members scrambled to figure out how a quiet asset manager held the key to the firm's survival. Juliana stood frozen in shock near the window, her smug smile completely wiped away as she realized the woman she had mocked was the rightful owner of the very empire they were trying to build. Whispers filled the glass hallways like wildfire, with frantic managers suddenly offering Elena every luxury office and corporate privilege they had previously denied her. Elena remained completely unbothered by their sudden, desperate displays of brown-nosing, calmly collecting her documents from the desk as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. She opened her terminal one last time to flag a massive paper trail of unrecorded debts that Juliana's department had tried to sweep under the rug for months. With a single click, She forwarded the full audit directly to Arthur Vance and the regulatory board, leaving no room for the corrupt leadership to escape their downfall. When Arthur returned to the office later that afternoon to offer Aylin a full controlling interest in his private investment fund, he found her sitting quietly in the empty lobby. He admitted that her father's secret agreement had protected his empire for 20 years, and that it was finally time for the daughter of Marcus to take her rightful place at the top of the financial world. Aylin stood up, straightened her simple blazer, and looked out over the city skyline, knowing her father's long-awaited plan had been executed to perfection. Juliana frantically tried to apologize as Aylin walked toward the private executive elevators, stammering out hollow excuses for her cruel remarks earlier that morning. Aylin paused for just a moment, glancing back with a cold, knowing smile that made Juliana's heart sink into her stomach. "You told me this ring looked like an ancient weapon," Aylin said quietly before the elevator doors closed between them. "And it turns out you were entirely correct." By sunset, the firm's board was dismantled, Juliana's uncle was removed from his position, and the corrupt executives were left to face the devastating financial fallout of their own making. From that day forward, the legend of the silver band circulated through the highest corridors of international finance as a warning to those who judge others by superficial appearances. Aylin stepped out into the evening air with absolute freedom, ready to lead a new era built on true integrity, quiet strength, and absolute intelligence.